Bismillah, Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Alhamdulillah, what a Mubarak way to start our halaqa. Allah accept, inshallah, and make things easy for our sister Sharon. You want to think about this, right? Theologically, our religion posits that before anything came into existence, Allah had written that all of us would be here at this moment to share it with our sister. And so you're not just here as a body, like there's a purpose to you being here. So think about what that might be and where you play a role, likely more critical than you might at times let yourself believe. We've been looking at a text from last semester, going through the winter break, and continuing through the course of this semester. It's called the Book of Assistance. It's by a well-known spiritual master of our tradition, Imam Al-Haddad, rahimahullah. And the text, the Book of Assistance, is a text on spirituality. It introduces to its reader in easily digestible chapters a roadmap towards spiritual increase. And so we're on the 5th chapter now that's on what's called awrad, wird, having a daily litany. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. But just to give a quick recap from where we were last semester going here, if you missed any of the sessions, they're all recorded. You can find them online. We're going through each very slowly and not just looking at a concept and talking about it, but thinking about how we can practically execute it, right? What does this mean in terms of my actual inward state? Ours is not a faith tradition that separates religion, spirituality, and ethics, but it sees these as three necessary components that synergize. Nor is it something that emphasizes only what is outward or external, right? Just like a body that has no soul to it is a corpse, a prayer that has no inner state to it is just as lifeless. We want to get to a place where our prostrations are not just prostrations with our physical body, but as we prostrate with our physical body, so too we're prostrating with our hearts. And this aspect of spirituality in our tradition is rooted to how we perceive things, right? The ability to draw meaning from the environment that's around us and to harness what, inshallah ta'ala, is our right, that is an inward state of balance and contentment that unfortunately escapes so many because the materialistic possessions that claim to give us that state, they end up actually not doing other than making us chase after it more and more, lending towards a deeper state of inward frenzy. Right? So what Islam posits is that you can have contentment and it can coexist with feelings of sadness and anger and joy. It's not an either or, but you can still maintain balance. It tells you that the satisfaction of your heart is a satisfaction that's going to give you an appeasement, a contentment that lets you still get through the difficulties and struggles of this world. And as we move in our own maturation organically, like you are not the same as what you were when you were 5 years old, right? You have had organic physical maturation. You don't eat the same foods as when you were a baby. You don't wear the same clothes. Your emotional, mental, physical spheres have maturation. It doesn't assume immaturity, but maturation in the sense that you're evolving in a certain way. Spiritually, it necessitates more of a deliberate mode of growth. It can't just happen by itself. You got to want it first. You got to want to be in a place where you're not just looking for complacency or simple satisfaction, but you want real rida. You want to have real contentment, right? And may Allah make us people of rida. But being in this place now where Imam Al-Haddad, he starts the text with a chapter on yaqeen, certitude, like deep faith. Certitude in the sense that the example that I gave over the last few weeks, the way you come in here and you have reasonable faith that the lights are going to turn on, that water is going to flow from the faucet when you make wudu, or you go to a fountain and you need to drink something, there's going to be water that comes out of the water fountain. The way you believe the lights are going to turn on when you hit the light switch, you want to have a belief in God and everything He promises to you with that same level of certitude. It's not even like a question in your mind. The lights are going to turn on when I hit the switch. That's what yaqeen is in the frame of our faith in what our religion teaches us of theology. And it sets it as the first chapter in the text because it's a destination point. None of you is the person sitting next to you. You are a fully autonomous individual. You have your own lived experiences, your own realities, your own strengths, your own non-strengths. It's a very limited approach to this religion that says individuality is somehow thrown out the window and text and context are not important to understand as we relate to how we connect to the divine. You didn't grow up the way that I grew up. I didn't grow up the way that you grew up. What yaqeen as a chapter does in the beginning is gives us a common destination point, not a common starting point, because how can we all start in the same place when we are all not in the same place? Does it make sense? It then goes into a second chapter on niyyah, intention, that you know why you're doing what you're doing prior to doing it, that you bring awareness and consciousness. You're not just running on default settings and it's all habitual. There's mindfulness, not mindlessness. And we're going to talk about this today when we talk about the wird, because this is a chapter that's about time management. It was essentially self-management. And there's a lot of crazy statistics that'll tell you that like most of us are spending our day just doing things that we're not using our heart or our minds. The average person today spends 5.5 hours on social media a day. It's a third of your wakeful day. Not just on a computer, right? And it's average. So it means 50% more, do more than that. There's those that do less than that. But you're in this constant state of it. It's just time being utilized. From niyyah, he goes to muraqabah, what's translated as vigilance, but you're essentially watching over your heart so your heart watches over you. You're in this place where you have an awareness as you move through this world, and your heart's in a state of wakefulness, not in a state of slumber. And the wakefulness has a conscious recognition of God. But just as we were saying when our sister Sharon was taking her shahada, you can't have a skewed conceptualization of God, or paradoxically have a formation of the divine that is not by choice, because the paradox is when you don't make a choice, you've essentially chosen. And many of us have not rendered for ourselves a depiction of the divine through Allah's book or His messenger, but it's more a vision that's an angry old man in the sky, because we hear things from people who claim to speak on Allah's behalf that do a terrible job of it. So it's not me that's telling you, but it's the messenger of God that says that Allah is more merciful to His creation than a mother is to his child. A good mother. Right? May Allah make us all good parents. That Allah's love is unconditional because He says He's al-wadud. So He doesn't love you just because of who you are. God loves you because of who He is. And that muraqabah is in a state of vigilance of that God. And then we ended the chapter last week on the inner self and the outer self. That understood now a different frame on this spiritual roadmap, that you've moved beyond now the first 3 chapters that are actions of the heart. Yaqeen, niyyah, muraqabah, the inner and the outer selves now introduced to you an entire being. And we talked about it in terms of core beliefs. Not just your psychological self in an Islamic framework, the ruh, the soul, the qalb, the spiritual heart, irada, sheer will and determination, aql, your intellect, the jasad, the body, the nafs, the lower self. But inside of you is also all of your memories. Inside of you is a recognition of your achievements and everything that you did that was a mistake. You have feelings, you have experiences, you have thoughts. There's so much that goes on within you. Just like there's so much that makes your external more than just what you see when you look in a mirror. And as we go into this chapter on awrad, the daily litanies, all of these concepts are going to blend into this. And this is one of the most critical things that you can learn that you want to pay attention to it and actualize it, implement it, because this is where shaitan gets us the most. He gets you to believe that you simply just don't have enough time. And then it has us in a place where we're chasing after things that create the frenzy within us to begin with. So we're going to start this 5th chapter. We're going to go through it over the next few weeks. If people want to pull up the text and get to chapter 5, that's on regular devotions. You can just Google the Book of Assistance PDF. It'll pop up for you. Can you all move up? Because there's people starting to get near the door. So we can come up this way. There's a lot of room in this. I don't smell bad. I'm a nice man. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so if you pull it up you can Google Book of Assistance PDF. And we're on chapter 5 on regular devotions. Can somebody start reading from the first sentence? You must. Anybody want to start? Huh?
I volunteered, I haven't done it yet.
Anybody?
I can.
Yeah, go for it.
You must fill your time with acts of worship so that no period of time elapses, whether by night or by day, without being used in some act of goodness. This is how the barakah within time is made manifest, the purpose of life fulfilled, and the approach to God, the exalted, made constant.
You keep going.
You should allocate specific periods of time for your habitual activities such as eating, drinking, and working for a livelihood. Know that no state can be sound in the presence of neglect, and no wealth useful in the presence of heedlessness.
Okay, so there's so much in our religion that's attached to time. What are some examples of how time is brought up in our religion? Quran, Hadith, anything. What are some things that come to mind? Yeah.
Praying on time?
Praying on time. Yeah, your prayers have timings to them, right? There's times to your prayers. There's disagreement on the start time and end time of prayers in various legal schools of thought, but everybody says there's 5 and that they have timings in which they're performed. The Hadith says, when the Prophet is asked, what is the best of actions that a person can undertake? In one narration, he says, as-salah, your prayer, ala waqtiha, upon its time, right? And it's not that it's in the first minute of the prayer, but in the window of time. But there's time that's there. What are other things that time comes up in?
Surah Asr.
Surah Asr, right? The entire thing is about time, right? Imam Shafi says that if somebody was to just do tadabbur of Surah Al-Asr, that's all they did was reflect on Surah Al-Asr and its meaning, that's all you would need from the Quran. It's got everything in it. What else talks about time?
The Day of Judgment?
The Day of Judgment, right? The Day of Judgment is a long day. May Allah grant us ease on it. And there's so much when the Day of Judgment is described. You can read the Quran, and there's people in various ayat of the Quran that when they are asked on the Day of Judgment by angels, like, what was this world like? They say, the Quran says, people are going to say, I think God only gave me one day, or maybe a part of a day. And what they're basing it on is they're being asked, like, what did you do with your time in this world? And they didn't do anything. And so they're saying, I must have been given no time, because my accounts are showing like nothing. And the Day of Judgment's a long day, because everything in creation is taken into account. Right? While our tradition teaches us that there's ease for those who come from lower social classes than higher social classes, is because if you got a lot of things, you're going to be taken into account for all the things that you have. If you don't have so many things, there's not so many things that you're going to be taken into account for. Wealth is not the problem. The Hadith says it's how you attained it and what you spent it on. So you got a whole closet full of stuff, that's not a problem, but what did you do with it? You have accountability towards it. What else it talked about in the frame of time?
Ramadan?
Ramadan? What did you say?
I said Ramadan.
You said Ramadan too? Oh, jinx. Now you guys can't talk. That's not how you play that game, brother. But there you go. Yeah.
The
Tahajjud, yeah, right? Your prayers. Ramadan, right? All of you know. If it's not you, you definitely know a Muslim who knows in Ramadan that Maghrib is going to happen. The number of times we have iftar and we're sitting there and somebody comes up to me and is like, hey, I think it's Maghrib time. I'm like, hey man, I know when it's time to pray. You don't have to tell me it's Maghrib time. I know that you know the exact second that it comes in now. But your fast is attached to timings, right? The period in which you start to withhold your food is attached to time. The time in which you can now eat is attached to time, right? Anything else that discusses time? Laylatul Qadr, right, is allocated in units of time. You search for it within specific days. You have a day that's now worth 1,000 months. It's defined to you by metrics of time. Anything else? Yeah.
The closer we get to the day of judgment, the faster time will pass.
Yeah, right? May Allah grant us ease. لا تقوم الساعة حتى يتقارب الزمان, the hadith says. That the hour will not commence until there is a shrinking of time. And one of the opinions on this hadith is that literally time will start to kind of shrink. That a 24-hour day will now be a 23-hour day, right? Other opinions that things that used to take time, a long period of time, won't take that much time. So it used to take a while to send a letter. You can now send it instantaneously. We're talking to people all over the world right now. There's a live stream from me. Or the third opinion on that hadith is that there's less barakah in your time. You can do less with your time because there's no blessings in it, right? And may Allah make us from amongst those who have barakah in our time. What are other things that talk about time? Anything else comes to mind? Yeah. The day of Arafah is attached to time. My foot's asleep. What else? Anything else? Yeah.
Time is not promised, like you always say. Pray as if it's your last.
Time is not promised. Death is rooted in a remembrance of limited time, right? We can understand it in this dimensional existence as something that's not tangible, but it's still kind of going and going. It's not infinite in terms of its allocation towards us. You have a time that's written for you that you will take your last breath in this world. May Allah make the best of our deeds the last of our deeds, and not let any one of us leave this world other than in a state that is most pleasing to Him. The hadith talks to you about special times to make dua. It's raining, make dua. You're traveling, make dua. It tells you at the time you break your fast, make dua. Between the adhan and the iqamah, make dua. So much that you can look at in our religion is attached to this thing of time. Do you get why shaitan wants you to think you don't have enough of it? Or do you get why shaitan wants you to utilize it in ways that are futile? There are two concepts that our text speaks about, lahu and la'ib. Something is lahu when it basically just has no point to it. The mu'minun in Surah Al-Mu'minun, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ الْمُؤْمِنُونَ, one of the characteristics that those who have succeeded have is they're described. وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ عَنِ اللَّغْوِ مُعْرِضُونَ, they're the ones who just turn away from what is futile. When Allah describes Jannah, He says, لَا يَسْمَعُونَ فِيهَا لَغْوَ, that you're not going to hear in it anything that is lahu. There's just no point to it. There's not benefit or detriment. At least the sinner has the opportunity to draw closer to the divine and engage in sincere dua in the mistake and misstep that they made. But the amount of your day that is spent doing things that have no purpose, that's where shaitan gets us. What is deemed to be play in the understanding of what is laib is also rooted in this futility. And it's not that you engage in something that is in a state of paranoia, that every single minute of my day has to be X, Y, or Z, and I can't have fun, or I can't do this or do that. That's not what it's saying. But there's a basis to this that we want to start to bring our consciousness in, because so much of it is going to be what is going to help that inward state reach its highest pinnacle. And if you're wasting time, then you're just wasting time. And if you're in a place where it's just filled with futility, it's filled with futility. And we'll talk about those things more, but just so you and I can be on the same page, this thing is important, right? Right? There's so much that's attached to it, right? And it's not necessarily something that's also hard. It's just about now understanding the inner aspect that gets in the way. The barakah that this is speaking about is something that is evident amongst not just people from centuries ago, but people who live contemporarily to you and I. You know people who just can get a lot done very small amounts of time. And there's some of us who we feel like we're just never caught up on anything. There's narrations in our tradition that say that Ali radiallahu an, from the time he would dismount from his mount till the time he touched the ground, he could recite the whole Quran. And in order for you to be in a place where you seize barakah, you have to be able to believe that that's an actuality that happened. There are scholars in our tradition who didn't necessarily live so long. Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, in the Sunni tradition, he died in his 40s. The amount of things that these people would write in terms of books and texts, if you were to just allocate over the course of a lifespan, the number of years that would be estimated per day what they were writing in terms of pages, we don't even read that much, let alone how much they had written. Your Prophet ﷺ only had Medina for 10 years. He was only 63 years of age in this worldly existence. His Meccan existence of 13 years was filled with persecution, hardship, tribulation. The establishment of everything that he built that has yielded a community that you're a part of that is 2 billion strong today and is all over the world. Nobody has been able to take it away from the world and exists in a way where over centuries of a lived tradition has trillions of people that have adhered and followed to it. How did he do all the things that he did in just a decade of his life? It's all rooted in this thing of barakah. It's all rooted in this thing of being able to bring blessing into it. And what Imam Al-Haddad is going to posit, that our tradition deeply posits on a spiritual level, is one of the ways you bring barakah to your time is by bringing structure to your time. You bring routine to your time. And it allows for that increase to take place. I want you to turn to the persons next to you. If you don't know their name, learn their name. Ideally in pairs, no more than 3, so everybody gets to talk. What gets in the way? What makes it hard? This thing of structure, time management, self-management related to it. And let yourself be vulnerable. Don't say the answers you're supposed to say. You're not like preaching to each other. But we want to yield from our collective by taking individual insight and understanding how we can extrapolate meaning from it, because we're reading a text that has timeless wisdom, but we're still living in a time that is much later than what it was written. And so there's things that get in the way for us these days that we have to think about, that is disrupting our ability to be able to maintain these types of routines. You see what I mean? Do you get the question? So if you could turn to the persons next to you, what gets in the way? What makes it hard? And don't think about it purely from the standpoint of specifics. This is why it's hard for me to pray on time, or this and that. But just your entire routine. Because if you are not designing your life, someone else is designing it for you. What is designing what your day looks like? Right now, your day, your breaths, your time. How is that being determined how it's spent? What gets in the way? What makes it easy? If you have some tips and techniques, and then we'll come back and discuss more. Go ahead. Okay. So, what are some of the things that are coming up for people? What are some of the things that are coming up? Who wants to start?
Sleeping habits, I would say, sleeping, on irregular times. That would mean, compensating the next day by not sleeping, and then it adds up.
Why? Why do you sleep poorly?
Overthinking, procrastination, not catching up with the day, many things apart from this, I would say.
Okay, so yeah.
Donnie and I talked about how a lot of the times we're just tired and we're always like trying to catch like that break, and then like sometimes personally I like enjoy my break too much and like have to like snap back into like the things that I need to do for myself. Also, we were talking about how like a lot of the times there are things that we know we need to do, but then it's just a matter of like actually doing them that like where the disconnect is.
Where is the disconnect? Why would you not do something that you know you're supposed to do? It's not a rhetorical question. It's also not a judgmental question, right? It's a question that has to be answered though. Because that's not a sufficient answer. It takes you 90% of the way, and then it opens the door for shaitan to get you to hate yourself. I know I'm supposed to do it. I didn't do it. I failed. I know I'm supposed to do it. I didn't do it. I let people down. I know I was supposed to do it. I didn't do it. Look at how screwed up everything is now. Why did you not do it? What gets in the way when you know it's supposed to be done, but you still did not do it? Why? Where's the disconnect? Yeah.
Maybe it's like poor planning.
Great. Poor planning. Other stuff? Yeah. Environment.
Instant gratification, like wanting to do something more pleasurable now rather than that later.
Okay. Other thoughts? Yeah.
Laziness.
Well, I was gonna say at least for me, I think it's just admitting to myself what my priorities are, and deciding not to adequately think about those things allows space for a huge lack of focus.
Amazing. This is a very important part, right? It's hard to admit it, but when you say, I don't have time for it, what you're saying is, it's not important to me. And you can say it every which way. Sometimes the world gets heavy and it makes you wake up to realities. Time has an elasticity to it. If it's important, you will find it. Some of you have heard me give the example before. If tomorrow you wake up and your roommate clogged your toilet and a plumber needs to come. And the plumber said, I'm going to come between 10 a.m. and 10 p.m. You're going to find those 12 hours to sit in your apartment because that toilet has to get fixed. If your Wi-Fi went out, or God forbid, your screen broke on your phone, and you needed to go and find it, and the guy said, I will fix it, but you need to sit in my store from noon until 5 p.m., and that's just the rule. And you just sit your butt down there until you got your phone back for 5 hours waiting. Where did it come from? My father had a severe stroke about 5-6 years ago. May Allah grant him shifa. Left him paralyzed on the right side of his body without the ability to speak. Many of you have known me for some time. Some of you have known me for less time than others. But most of you would assume that I have a very busy routine. I, in the beginning of my career, hardly ever spent time with my mother and father as much as I wanted to. And nobody ever faulted me for it. As much as I also didn't spend time taking care of my physical self, my emotional self, my spiritual self, my mental self. I was getting sick all the time. I felt more alone than I'd ever felt. Everything was just burden, burden, burden. I found out my father had his stroke when I had landed in Florida to speak at an event there. They'd taken me to have breakfast at a diner, and I was in the restroom to freshen up. I came out, I found my phone, had like 30 missed calls on it. I picked up the next one, it was my sister. She said they found Dad in the parking lot of his office. It was a Saturday. 2 people by chance. He had a stroke, he's in the hospital. I went back to the airport. They got me on the next flight to New York. I landed in JFK, and someone picked me up and drove me to LaGuardia, where I had my car parked. I used to have a car. And then I drove to New Jersey, and I got to the hospital 7 hours later. And if you've been in a hospital, you know that there's just long hallways. The entirety of the hallway was just a row on both sides of my family members who had all been there, including my wife and kids, because they were in New York. I was in Florida by myself. And I walked in, and I sat next to my dad, and then I didn't leave New Jersey for the next 2 months. The Islamic Center did not stop functioning. You all are sitting here right now, right? It didn't go into a state of chaos. Jummah still happened, programs still happened, everything still happened, alhamdulillah. Where did that time come from? That prior to, I didn't have the ability to sit in the home I grew up in for more than a couple of hours, maybe a dinner every few weeks, a month. Now I was there for weeks on end. You don't want to learn about the amount of time you actually have through something like that. You want to think at this juncture that when you say, I don't have it, you're saying, it's not important to me. It's not a priority. How can your heart not be a priority to you? How can the state of your physical health not be a priority to you? How can your emotional healing, your spiritual wellness, why are these not priorities? Again, not rhetorical questions, but whose life are you chasing after? And what world are you giving priority over the world beyond this one? Why are you not making amends for the things that you need to seek forgiveness for? What tomorrow do you believe in that's going to be guaranteed to you that is going to come? The laghu and the la'ib is not just about don't play football and soccer. That's not what it is. It's don't play games, man. What are you playing games with? The state of your heart? Your place in the akhirah? May Allah make us all people of Jannah. The dimensions that we talked about in day 1 of this text reading. If you remember, right? I said on a vertical, you have Islam. That's what most of us have. It's one dimension. So all you guys one dimension, whenever you look at, is just simplistic. It's a line. Our tradition adds at a second frame, Iman, theology. It brings shape now. The line, it turns into a rectangle, a diamond, a square. You can understand more from it. We bring a third dimension that is ihsan, that brings depth and volume. You can understand that it has multiple perspectives to it. What the Hadith Jibra'il does, after it introduces these 3 concepts, he asks the Prophet ﷺ about the hour. And it encapsulates these 3 dimensions now in this 4th principle of time. All of it just is exerted in this. Most of you don't know why you do what you do for the majority of your day. And I'm saying that to you with love. If you really sat and you looked at the entirety of your routine and said, why did I spend this much time on this thing? It's not even that you're engaged in things that are causing evil in the world. May Allah protect us from that. But some of it is. Why you spend so much time gossiping, man? You're giving the benefit of your good deeds to someone else as you're accruing dark spots on your heart. You're literally killing yourself. Why would you do that? If you do not design your life, someone else will design it for you. Who was here at Jummah last Friday at the IC? Anybody? Okay. We were at Jummah. What I tried to talk about, I don't know if I make sense sometimes, so I'm going to try to summarize what I said. And then if it sounded like that, you let me know, so I know that it kind of got to where I wanted to. In Surah Nas, Allah, when He talks about shaitan, may Allah protect us from his whispers, He says, الَّذِي يُوَسْوِسُ فِي صُدُورِ النَّاسِ. The sadr is the outer layer of the chest. We talked about this in the last chapter. You have 4 layers, the sadr, the qalb, the fu'ad, the lub. So something happens that transitions the knocking on the chest, the sadr, from the waswasa into the qalb. And what the Quran also says is that shaitan doesn't get access to you without your permission. You're the one that lets him enter. He's just knocking on the outside. You're letting him in. Does this sound like what I talked about at Jummah on Friday? Yeah, you don't have to make me feel better. You can just say, I did not get that from you at all. I just remembered you called your wife like shaitan or something. One of the things that shaitan is going to constantly get in your head, guaranteed, whisper, because you do not have structure and routine, because I'm not designing my life, someone else is designing it for me. Look at what I do for a living. And in the midst of what I did, I still was not going to take good time with my family. It's not okay. The merit, the recognition, the goodness, whatever you want to qualify it, doesn't make a difference. I was stuck in my job the way you're stuck in your job. Doesn't make any sense. One of the things that shaitan's going to come knocking with constantly, at the end of a prayer, when it's time to make dua, when you're deciding, should I pray some extra rak'ahs or not? Should I sit for the dars or should I go someplace else? Should I go and give salams to that person whose face I've never seen, or I recognize her from that day she came and now no one's talking to her? What we said in Jummah last week, but 2 weeks ago, is that shaitan's whispers come to you through your characteristics. And he's going to knock on that chest and he's going to say, you don't have time to make dua. You don't have time to pray those extra prayers. You don't have time to be kind to somebody. Nobody says salam to you. Why are you going to go say salam to somebody else? Nobody else is getting done the things that they said they would. Why should you get done the things that you said you would get done? He's going to get you to believe that you don't have time. It's not infinite in what's been allocated to you, but it's definitely something you have a lot more than you want to admit. And when you just regurgitate other people's words and other people's behaviors, you live in this city, I live in this city, my family lives in this city. People ask me all the time, you're raising your kids in New York City? I'm like, hey man, I don't talk to you about how you raise your kids. Why are you talking to me about how I raise my kids are really great, mashallah. But we're not running hectic the way most of these people run hectic in this world. And there's a beauty that's in our city as well, that if you haven't had the time to just sit and look for it, it doesn't mean that it's not there. But what has you running? What are you chasing after? And why is that the priority? What are the things that shaitan gets you on? There's distinctions. nafsani thoughts versus shaitani thoughts. Shaitani thoughts are going to tell you to just do haram. Don't even pray. The nafsani thoughts are going to be the ones that say, somebody else is going to clean up after iftar. Somebody else is going to be the one that vacuums the carpet. You don't need to pray those extra prayers. You see the distinction in the two modes of thoughts? And why we have to talk about the inner self and the outer self in the 4th chapter before you talk about time management, which is self-management, in the 5th chapter, because time management is management of the self. You don't know what's going on inside of you. It doesn't mean that it's not coming up. I want you to think individually, just within yourself, for a minute. What are some of the things in the last week that you didn't do because you told yourself you don't have the time to do it? And are those really things that you just simply didn't have the time to do? Just think about it. And now as you think about that, think about in the last week, what did you fill your time with? What does that day look like? That routine look like? Where's their structure? Where is there not? The majority of what you do that is routine is just rooted in either professional ambition, which you hope to become professionally, or what you actually do professionally now. And then everything thereafter has an absence of structure. Let's make that assumption. Our Prophet ﷺ, he didn't stay awake really late at night. He liked to go to bed shortly after the Isha prayers. He liked to be awake. He prayed tahajjud, wake up before Fajr, definitely woke up for Fajr, but then was awake. And he has hadith where he says that Allah has blessed this ummah with barakah in the morning times. There's habits, there's routines, winding down the day, when you are eating, when you are not eating, regularity to it. That you're not a cow, the Quran says. You don't just kind of wander aimlessly. Oh, this person's here, maybe I'll do this. That's going on, maybe I'll do that. It doesn't mean you can't be spontaneous or have fun. Something comes your way. But if every day is just aimless, there's no niyyah rooted in why am I doing what I'm doing. There's no end goal or objective. It's just kind of floating here and there. And those minutes and those hours are going to get passed. And then that book on that day of judgment is going to have pages that are not filled to capacity, but literally, the Quran says, the angels will come to some people and will look at them and say, what did you even do? May Allah never make us from amongst those people. This is a place and existence of exertion, of action. How do you start to do this? How do you start to build that structure and build that routine? Because the wird is a regular litany. Adhkar, Quran, dua, variations that we'll talk about. But if it's going to fit itself into what is also a mess and chaotic, then it's not going to fit. Where do you start? How do you do this? What do you think?
You can set some goals for yourself. It could be small, and you could keep adding goals to your list.
Great. Like what?
Just for me, just earlier while you're saying this talk, the first goal I set for myself would be sleeping by midnight.
Sleeping what?
Sleeping by midnight.
Sleeping by midnight? Yeah, mashallah. I used to remember that time in my life. Yeah.
I think one thing can be splitting your day into 5 chunks, like between Fajr and Dhuhr, and then, you know, between the prayers.
Why would you do that?
Maybe because you want to accomplish certain things between this time and this time, like finish this task or finish my schoolwork, extra work, go to work, you know, hanging out with friends.
What does that have to do with prayers?
I guess it's kind of like you design your day around those prayers so that that also can hold you accountable.
Good. If this is your life, there's nothing written on it for your day. Start with a blank slate and feed into it what you want to be the priority first. And if all you have written down is work, class, that stuff, you don't have to look at anyone else. Nobody's your day is telling you what's important to you. You see what I mean? This is where intention is important. I go to the gym every morning. I am not exercising for vanity. I know where I am. Alhamdulillah, Allah gave me an amazing wife. Definitely married up. I have amazing children. I'm good where I am. I know what I am and still learning things about me. I go to the gym for my own wellness. I know my mind is a lot clearer when I exercise. I know my emotions are a lot more uplifting when I'm exercising. And so the inner and the outer are related. So it's not just enough to put on it, I'm going to go work out. If you're going to work out because you want to walk down the street and have people point at you and say, man, look at how amazingly muscular that boy is. That's how we talk to ourselves, right? Then that's not the good reason to go to the gym. How's that going to bring barakah into your day? You know what I'm saying? Right? So you're going to pray, and prayer is important to you. How would you know based off of your routine? Right? I don't know what your sleep schedule is like. If I go to bed at midnight, I know that when I wake up for Fajr, I'm going to be more drowsy than not. That's me. You could go to bed at midnight, and it's great for you. But I can't. I try to go to bed every night. I was talking to somebody today who said, can we meet in Gramercy? And I'm like, yeah. I live in an NYU dorm. A lot of you have been in my house, mashallah. If you haven't, I'd love for the rest of you to come over. And this guy was like, well, I'm going to go do this, and I'm going to go do that, and I'll probably be back at Graham by like 11, and maybe we can meet after that. And I was like, man, I am not 18 years old. Do you want my wife to punch me in the face and then punch you in the face? I try to get to bed by 9:30, 10 o'clock. I like to have a good 7-8 hours of sleep, alhamdulillah. It's a good sweet spot for me. But I'm also going to sleep so that I can wake up the next day. I'm not going to sleep so that I can go back to sleep after I get up. Do you see what I mean? But I have to know that about me, right? If your prayer is important to you, how is the time you go to sleep show you how you value the Fajr of the next day? When you are in Ramadan, may Allah allow for us to reach it and benefit from it. How is the time you go to bed and spend your nights going to indicate that you actually find Laylatul Qadr is something important? Do you understand? That your suhoor meal has barakah in it. Do you get what I'm saying? You don't have to look elsewhere. You just open up a book, work on a Google Calendar, and it'll show you, this is what I have going on. It's showing me what is important. And you don't want to get stuck in a routine that somebody else is designing your life. And if you do not design it for yourself, they will design it for you, so that you become a mechanism through which they get deeper pockets and they get more wealth. And you are in this place where you tell yourself, That's what existence is supposed to be. I'm not saying don't have a job. I'm saying don't put an equal sign between you and your job. You had your hand raised? Yeah.
Yeah, I forget what school this was, but there was a professor, when he was teaching his class, he took like a jar, and he had a bunch of like rocks of like different sizes, like small rocks, pebbles, and like larger rocks. And so, in front of the students, he filled up the jar first with like all the small pebbles, and he tried to put in the medium rocks after that, and then the large rocks. But he didn't have any room to put in these rocks, like the rest of the rocks. And so he asked the students, like, how do I get these big rocks into this jar? And it was about, like, you put the big rocks in first, and then you fill in the smaller things at the end. And that's how you can kind of fit everything in there. And so it's about, like, the big rocks are kind of representing, like, what are the priorities of life? And then you can look at that with, like, the salah, like prayer and things like that. And then going down to, like, I think it goes back to someone said over there about like prioritizing like a schedule based on the important things in life, and so it just made me kind of think of that, like also part of this discussion.
Yeah. What are some things that would be the big rocks in life? Yeah.
For me, keeping in touch with my family daily.
Let's do this. You can talk to the person that's next to you, which is a great answer. You can talk so everybody's talking about it, right? What are some of the things that should be those big rocks? When you were creating a structure, it doesn't have to be every day, doesn't have to be every week, but things that have to be regular, what do you think should be? What you really think? Don't say the answers you're supposed to say, but what should be some of those things that are happening with regularity in your routine, structured, not by chance, but structured? You can talk to the persons next to you, then we'll come back and discuss. Okay, so what are some of the things that we would identify, like these big rocks, the important priorities in our lives? Yeah.
So when we were discussing, we talked about how connecting with community is something that we think is like a big rock. Just maintaining in touch with people whom we have nothing to gain from, and people who have nothing to gain from us, like materialistically, but just maintaining in touch with them is something that at least I come to.
What do you gain from them if you're not gaining from them materialistically?
Just learning from them, or just staying in touch with them. Yeah.
Yeah, it's nice to just be around people, right?
Yeah.
They kind of get it. Community, you know? It's not, oh, we're friends because, like, I can make money off of you. Or, you know, like these kinds of, you know what I mean? Right? Yeah.
I think the big rocks in my life right now would probably be my religion, my family, and my education, because I am a student right now.
Great. Anything else? Yeah.
I was going to say, even things like food and regular meal times, eating healthily, and like whether you cook or not, that kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, and those types of things are important, right? Because you can't just take it for granted or just assumption. Your physical wellness has to be a priority in your life, right? If I went and asked each one of you to tell me what your sleeping habits are, most of you would have ridiculous sleeping habits. They make absolutely no sense whatsoever. Why? Like, why do you do that? And it's like you have to ask yourself, right? And this is what I said to you. Remember what I said in Jummah last week? I just said, Shaitan's going to knock at your sadr. He's going to have you walk out. That's why I got to stay awake till, you know. I talked to a couple when I was traveling over the break. And we were sitting, I said to people at a retreat I was speaking at, if anybody wants to talk one-on-one, let me know. And we sat and we talked. And these guys, you know, have little kids, hard jobs. And at the end of it, they like force themselves to stay awake. And they both fall asleep on a couch watching TV. And I said, why? Like, why do you do that? And they're like, I don't know. And I said, no, that's not a good answer, right? And I said, let me tell you why I think you do it. You tell yourself that somehow, because everybody else is in bed now, and this is the only time that you have quote-unquote alone time, that you must stay up and force yourself to do something together. I was like, look at how miserable you look, right? The lady said, I just fall asleep 10 minutes after the television's on. And the guy's like, I just sit and like eat more food then, because I don't know what to do, and I feel bad, I want to turn the TV off, because then she gets up and is like, no, I'm awake. I'm like, you know, right? And they said, well, what do you think we should do? These are grown people, right? They're not to fight. Like, go to sleep, right? My son goes to sleep at 8. My daughter goes to bed at 8:30, right? There's some times I fall asleep at 8:45. I don't care. You'd be like, oh, why are you going to sleep at 8:45? I am a happy person. Are you a happy person? That's why I go to bed when my body says it's tired. I'm a 40-year-old man. I don't take naps during the day. Do you take naps during the day? Then your body is telling you that you're not doing right by it. Pay attention to the signs. When I was in my 20s, I chose not to pay attention to the signs. And I got sick all the time. I was bitter, resentful, burdened, lonely. It was hard. And my body had to literally implode on itself in illness for me to wake up to the signs it was giving to me for over a decade. You just gotta pay attention. Allah gave you everything. But if you choose to live in denial of it, or, as was said, you want immediate gratification, good. Stay up till a time that makes no sense. It's gonna catch up to you. Why would you want to do that to yourself? Do you see what I mean? So this box of wellness physically is important. You have to prioritize what you eat, how you eat. It's not about the quantity of it. We all have different relationships to food. But in understanding, the goal is not also just what is simplistically like rooted in supremacist mindsets of beauty. You are beautiful because Allah made you beautiful. You're not beautiful based off of this weight or this look or that look. And so you think, like, what does my body need for energy? The quality, the quantity, the timing of it, these kinds of things. If I told you Ramadan is in 2 months, you should start fasting now, I guarantee that for those who don't do it regularly right now, a flurry of thoughts would go through most of your heads. How can I fast? I won't be able to go to work. I can't study for this. My breath is going to stink, right? Although some of us claim that our breath does not smell bad when we fast. But that's a different story. It's just shaitan knocking. If you could do it for a month in a row in the summer when the day is longer, why could you not do it for a day in a week or for 3 days in a month or 2 days in a week when the days are much shorter? But you have to think about the why. Why is this a priority? Why is this not a priority? How is my schedule reflective of my heart? Do you get what I'm saying? And nobody else is going to be able to choose those choices for you. Do you get what I mean? And priorities are important. Is your education a rock that's big enough that it's bigger than your physical wellness? Is it worth it? The answer to that has to be no. Is wealth, affluence, influence, notoriety worth having no social relationships and friendships, companionships? Worldly success, is it worth it? No, it's not. When you start to now put these rocks, it's not, I'm just going to throw all of them, because when they're big, all of them can't fit. And some of them you have to diminish in their capacity, not say that they're unimportant, but my health is not worth this stress. This amount of money is enough for me. I don't need more than this. so that I don't have to give up on all of this other stuff. Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? What are some other boxes, some other rocks that you could put into this? Yeah.
For me personally, I hope to gain stability. Like, it's one of my major goals actually, because I've been moving a lot between countries, and every time like I have to start from scratch. So I'm hoping that this time, like, it's gonna be like my last place, I hope.
Inshallah. Well, we're grateful you're part of our community. Alex joined the IC middle of last December, last semester at some point. But he's been coming here for a few months, alhamdulillah. And I know the people around here will do what we can to welcome him and make this feel like home for him, inshallah. As well as everybody else who is looking for a space that they can find roots, right? When you're trying to build stability that is not necessarily a concrete concept, right? The way that I can say, I want to sleep 5 hours more in a day. I can't say I want to have 5 more units of stability. But what's going to give us a sense of grounding are these other buckets of priority as well. And when the world gets heavy and throws you off, how is it going to be easier to find stability if you're not eating well or sleeping well? How are you going to argue with your family when they tell you you can't marry the person you want to? When they become totally dejected because you said, I don't want to be a doctor. How are you going to get to that place? All of you is connected to the rest of you, right? If I kick you in your foot and you say, ow, from your mouth, I can't say, why is your mouth saying this? I hit you in your foot, not in your mouth. Doesn't make sense, right? The other day when we were talking about feelings, and I said, where do you feel sadness? And you all said, I feel it everywhere. How is that possible? Do you get what I mean? So you want to be in a place where you find grounding, stability, something feels like it's home. Sometimes the challenge of building that outward is rooted in what's going on here. In this set of priorities, what are you building that's a regular understanding of caring for your heart? Surrounding yourself with people that are good for your wellness. And it's all connected when you have that imbalance. And from the minute you're awake until the minute you go to bed, you're getting bombarded with marketing that tells you that your sense of wellness, stability, happiness is rooted in buying what all of these things are marketing against you to get you to purchase what they sell. But the treasure that you have is just always with you already. You just got to take care of it. You got to be in a place where you're paying attention to it. And you do the exercises, these other things that come into play. The wird gets fit into it. So you have a regular routine where you're reading Quran, you're doing adhkar, you're engaged in these practices, not just the bare minimum. You don't want to be somebody, right? And shaitan, he comes in different ways. I was praying with my kids. My son is 7. My daughter's 10, right? It's not farded upon them. May Allah make them steadfast in their prayer. And so they're little kids. We're praying in my apartment, and I stand, my daughter's making wudu, I go with my son, we're going to pray dhuhr, and I call the iqamah, and he said, Baba, do you think I should pray my sunnahs? My head was already in a place where I said, they're 7, they're kids, maybe we'll just start here and do this and do that. Even what you can frame sometimes in a positive can still be like shaitan knocking on your chest, right? And instruction comes from everywhere. My 7-year-old is teaching me something. I have to be open to being able to listen to it. Do you get what I mean? Right? How does your routine? And if you say to me, Khalid, you don't know what it's like for me. Yeah, I don't know what it's like for you. But I can tell you, I am a pretty busy man. And because I love you, I don't want you to go through the hell I went through for the majority of a decade of my life because I was just running on empty. Our tradition then gives to us different ways of increasing barakah, in addition to this thing of structure and routine that we're going to talk about in the coming weeks. But you got to first buy into this concept, because this is not meant to be entertainment. This is meant to be us actually being willing to learn about ourselves and then implement, right? Answering this question, why don't you do what you know you are supposed to do? So you bring a closer proximity to the things you know in acting on the things that you know. Do you get what I mean? And then you just start to be in a place where people start to say about you that you are reliable. The Prophet is trustworthy and fulfills his amana because he is not late on things. He's not in a place where he's procrastinating. He's in a place where if somebody expects him to get it done, he's going to get it done. He's going to get it done with kindness and compassion and this kind of stuff. And when he needs help, he turns to people and asks for help. It's all in those buckets. If you don't invest in relationships, then relationships are not there. You see what I mean? Does it make sense? Okay. What I'd like for you to do between this week and the next time we meet is just sit with yourself and your routine. You're going to have different things that come into your life. Schedules will need to have flexibility. I was single before I was married, and I was married before I had kids, right? And so when my kids are little and they're praying and they're waking up at Fajr time, and my son, even now, my son's 7 years old, I had to tell him after we prayed that, I was like, hey man, you have to just stand still, man, right? He's 7 and he's cute, you know? He's a cute kid. I don't know what else to say. And we're praying, and there's a little fuzzy ball on my sleeve, he told me. And so he's flicking at it while we're praying, right? And then he's trying, because I've told him to be still, but he's a little kid. And he's rubbing his head against my arm. Right? And I'm like, what are you doing, man? I can't say anything. We're praying. What am I supposed to say? Right? And you could be the most stable heart in the world. There's no way if a little boy is rubbing his head against your arm that you're not going to know that that's happening, right? Especially if it's your son. And then he's and then I don't know what happened. He just started to look at my face. Right? So I'm praying. It's not even from here. It's right here looking at me. I'm like, dude, what are you doing? So I finished the prayer. I was like, Kareem Baba. I was like, what is going on? And he was like, Baba, this thing was on your arm. And I was like, why are you rubbing your head into my body like a ram, man? Right? And I had to explain it to him. What am I going to tell my son? That he's the worst thing in the world? No, astaghfirullah. May Allah protect me from ever being a father like that. This is my child. I love him. He's a boy. He's a baby. He's going to do what children do. It's not going to be the most spiritually uplifting moment of prayer. But I just have to find that in different parts of my day. You know what I mean? And so when things change, you become malleable to them, right? Before we were having iftar, and one of the sisters who started working recently, she said to me, I'm trying to figure out how to make wudu at work. It's not the same, right? And don't take for granted, because some of you do. Things that you have, you don't realize until you don't have them anymore, you know? And our Sharia works in certain situations circumstantially, but she's got to adapt to a new circumstance. You see what I mean? And try to figure that out and what that means to her. So it's not creating stress where she gets to a place where she's like, I'm just going to pray them all when I get home. That's not the answer. You understand? It's not. So spend some time with your routine and just look at your schedule, your day, your week. How much at the end of your day can you look back and say, I just spent it looking at something mindless, lahu, la'ib, made no sense. Be honest with yourself. What did you do that was haram? Lying, gossiping, backbiting, cheating, speaking ill of people. Allah protect us from these things. What was of your day that you spent doing things, your week, that you could say, this was purely for my heart, for the increase of my celestial self, my emotional wellness, my physical wellness, my spiritual wellness, my mental wellness? And how is it a reflection of me, like where I'm at? And if it doesn't look like it's making sense, how do you get it to make sense? You see what I mean? If in that I can be helpful, and we can kind of talk through things, sometimes it's not about, I need to just throw everything away, but it's about how do you change things in a day structurally? Because you want to understand, like, the utilization of strength doesn't render weakness, but if there's not processes to replenish after you've expended energy, you're going to get tired. If you start your day tired, and then you do other things that are tiring, right, then you're going to be tired. So what do you do when you're tired? What do you do when you're tired? Huh?
Sleep.
Sleep. But do you? No, what do you do when you're tired?
Drink coffee.
Huh?
Drink coffee.
Bad news, right? It's not good. When those who are engaged in worship of the divine sought to stay up in the late hours of the night and utilize coffee as a mechanism, they were doing it to increase the stability of their inside. To over-caffeinate yourself in pursuit of something that's the source of anxiety in the first place is not going to lessen anxiety, it's going to increase anxiety. So sometimes when you're tired, you just got to go to sleep, right? That's just what you got to do. And then you wake up and you're refreshed. And then you eat something. Take a shower, you ease into the day, right? And we'll talk about these things. But as a starting point, you got to be honest and vulnerable with what your routine looks like. The second part that I would say, if you have responsibility towards someone else in your life, you want to start to think and see how your routine impacts their routine. When you don't do what you are supposed to do, not just in terms of familial relationships. You are a husband, you are a wife, you are a child, you are a parent, you're a sibling to a sibling, a friend to a friend. How does your routine, structured or unstructured, impact the people around you, your places of employment, your work, these things? You do not get your work done. What does it do to the rest of the people that are there? You don't do the assignment in your group. What is the rest of your group supposed to do? Right? You are in a place where people rely on you and you don't get it done. That doesn't mean that everything else just magically happens on it. Do you get what I'm saying? And so in a second phase, you start to think, how is what I am doing impacting now those that are around me also? Right? I had to have an honest conversation with myself. I didn't eat any processed sugars for like years. And then COVID hit and I fell off the wagon hard, man. Like really hard, you know? I was eating like sweets every day, sometimes twice a day. And I realized my kids start to eat this garbage constantly also. And I don't want to be the reason that my kids are hurting, right? This stuff impacts your emotions. Sugar like kills your feelings. It puts you on this high and then you crash and you feel like dejected. It's a literal like legal drug. It's crazy. But in order for me to understand the impact on my beloveds, I have to admit what I'm bringing into their life. If you sleep through Fajr, then your friends, your family, your community, your people, they're not benefiting from your Fajr. And your du'as are the only ones that can be made by you. No one else can make them. If you are spending in your routine countless hours engaged in the haram, then you're bringing that into other people's lives. But also if you're forcing somebody to follow your structure, that's not the way that they need to be. I go to bed at a certain time. My wife and I are two totally different people. Like literally different. We were in Zanzibar and I talked to some people from Zanzibar And I got on the plane home from Zanzibar. I had food poisoning. We had eaten at an outdoor food market. And when I was talking to these people from Zanzibar, they were like, I hope you didn't eat there. And I said, I did. And they're like, did you get sick? I got very sick. My wife, she's got a cast iron stomach, right? She not only ate there, she ate everything from there. And she looked like she was having the time of her life. And I was on the flight home, sitting just dry heaving, this is terrible. And I ate a bite of something, and I drank a little bit of sugarcane juice, right? But we're different people. She stays up later, I go to bed earlier. She still wakes up early, mashallah. She doesn't need as much sleep as I do. I am good with lots of people around me quite often. She is good with it, but in a more limited capacity. We're different people. Your routine is not meant to be now the criteria for somebody else's routine. They're not you. You have to find for them a way for them to still be themselves. You get what I mean? My daughter is not a morning person. My son is a morning person. Kareem is up 5, 6 in the morning, jumping in my face, loving to live the day. My daughter, literally, I still carry her. 10 years old, out of her bed, blanket, hair is all in her face. She looks like I don't even know what. They're children. One of them relates to the day different than the other relates to the night different, right? It's like some of you respond to the coldness of the weather, the shortness of the day, the diminishing sunlight, different from others do. You cannot say that simply the way you do it is the way that everybody has to do it. You understand? And you can't find your validity through everybody doing it the same way as you do. We have 5 prayers, that's the base. You get what I mean? You can fast some days of the week. Doesn't mean everybody in your house, your apartment, all your friends have to do it. You can read Quran in the morning. Somebody else might read it at night. You might read it every day. Somebody might read it once a week. You might read it in a whole khatam in a month, and some might do a khatam in a year. Or they might not even be at a pace where they do it in a year. It's different for different people. Do you get what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Does it? It's really, really important, right? You don't want to get in the habit that the people that you love are just people who you actually are just loving the parts of them that remind you of yourself. But you love them for who they are fully, and you help them to get to their potential best, just as they help you get to your potential best. Do you see what I mean? And then you take the prophetic prescriptions and you say, how does it fit into my life? A little bit at a time. How do I gradually introduce things, right? I set goals for myself every so often. I'm going to try to get to bed by midnight. Great, man. May Allah grant you tawfiq in that and give you a sleep that is restful and rejuvenating. Do you get what I'm saying? He doesn't have to go to bed at 9 o'clock. Never in his life. I'm not going to stand here and be like, astaghfirullah, you're the worst person in the world. I go to bed at 9 p.m. I don't even remember the last time I saw midnight in my life. What is wrong with you? No, what are you talking about? I'm an old man. Go and stay awake, man. Make dua for me when you're going to bed at midnight, right? There's barakah in that hour. Do you get what I mean? Right? You have to see it as you. That's you. It's your fajr. It's your dhuhr. It's your asr. It's your dua. It's your health. It's your heart. It's your body. It's your mind. You can make excuses. The things that you're coerced into, you're not accountable for those. But at some point, you got to look back at yourself. That's what our spiritual tradition is. You have a prophet, then when revelation stopped for a period, he turns to Allah and says, did I do something wrong? He doesn't say, did other people do something wrong? He said, what did I do that you're not sending it anymore? Do you get what I mean? Does that make sense? Okay. Any thoughts before we kind of make a few announcements and then pray Isha? Yes? No? Great.